Hey, Ricky, do you want to go ahead and start and tell a little bit about yourself?
Yes, sure. Well, welcome everyone. Good to see you again. My name is Dr. Ricky Frierson. I'm the Director of Diversity and Inclusion at Colorado State University, College for Natural Resources. And so I am here with my lovely co-host.
Understand people from poverty, we define it as the extent to which an individual does without resources. And so when we think about poverty, what is the one resource that always comes to mind first? And so you can just click that in the chat box real quick if you want to. What's the first resource that we think of when we think of poverty that students need? Money. Yeah, money, books, money for books, food, housing. Great. Yes, all of those things, because all of those things have to do with a financial resource that our students are missing that creates a lack of stability in their lives. And so the way we're going to define poverty is the extent to which our students do without resources, but more specifically, we're going to give a list of resources other than just money. We know that financial resources create some stability. We know that getting through life is a lot easier if we have that financial resource. But the really great thing about this definition that we're using as we talk about, let's see, yeah, we've got 8 listed here, these 8 resources. As we talk about these 8 resources, the neat thing about this is it gives us something that we can do. Because I don't know about you, but there aren't a lot of us at the university, staff, faculty, administration that can just hand out money to our students to increase that resource. And so what we can do is we can look at the other resources and try to figure out where can we have the greatest impact with our students, in what resources. So as we briefly go through these resources, I want you to think about which ones can you impact? Which ones do you have the ability to impact with maybe just a little bit of time and a little bit of effort, but not a lot of money involved? And so of course we have the financial, but we also have emotional resources that are necessary. So being able to choose and control their emotional responses. We think about our students and about how quickly they turn to their emotional side and let some of those things go that lead to success. We have the mental, so having the mental abilities, so those cognitive skills, and we're going to get into those cognitive skills in a little bit, because what we know is that our students have, they lack some of the cognitive skills that their peers are coming in with. Their spiritual, physical, the support systems, having the friends, the family, the backup resources, those external resources. And so some of our students have a lot of bonding capital, so the relationships in their life, the people that are just like them, but they don't have a lot of bridging capital, so those people that can help get them ahead. And so a lot of times that's what college is all about. Are we able to connect our students? And I know what we found is sometimes at our university, we weren't doing a real fantastic job of helping our students create this bridging capital that would help them to be successful when they left school. So we had to get really intentional about what interventions can we do in order to increase bridging capital and support systems in their lives. Of course, relationships that are nurturing and appropriate for students, and the knowledge of hidden rules. So those really significant resources that we can impact in order to help stabilize their environments and move them to a place of hopefully moving them out of poverty by building their resources. And so this is something, so just keep in mind, what can you impact here? What do you have the ability to impact? And where can you make a difference as we go through today's presentation? And so what we have next is a mental model of poverty. So all of us bring with us this idea of what poverty is. So we all have this mental picture of what poverty is. And so together, we're just going to try to create a shared model. And so this is an example of a shared model of poverty that we oftentimes put together when we're in groups and we have a lot more time. We put this mental model together. And what you can see within this model are all of the interconnected pieces that affect a person's day. Meaning, how are our students spending their time? How are they spending their energy? And what we know about our students is a lot of times they're living in this really unstable environment. And they're also at the same time trying to do school, and they're trying to work, and they're trying to take care of their families, and they're trying to possibly take care of children. They're also helping out their family by helping their family to take care of their lives too, oftentimes. You can see there's just a wide array of things that impact our students' days, our students' just their moments all of the time during the day. And so some of these are really connected. And so one of the stories that I like to share is just thinking about how much time it takes for maybe one of our students just to do their laundry. And so if we have a student who doesn't have a washing machine and they have to go to the laundromat, they may have to take public transportation to the laundromat. They may have to haul children with them. They may have to make sure that the bus timing is right and all of those things, and that they have enough coins then to be able to dry all of their clothes. And there's a whole lot of things in there. And so one of the things is living in poverty takes a lot of time. And so even the task of doing my laundry, okay, can take up a lot of time, but we're asking students to fully engage in their homework, to fully engage sometimes right now in online learning, if they're Zooming and all of those other things with us that I know some schools are doing. But we're asking them to engage when already they're living in a really unstable environment where their problem solving is in the moment. And we use this phrase, tyranny of the moment, because decisions are being made in the here and now. And so if you look at this mental model and just look at the different things that are in it. Some of you guys brought up food and clothing, or food and housing and different things like that. So those are all things that are taking my time and taking my energy from school. And so I just want you to take a look at this, just a real quick look at the things that are in it, and notice that the driving force is written across the mental model, which is relationships. Because without relationships, I cannot survive in this economic environment, because it's relationships that helps me with all of those different pieces and helps me get by. I depend on other people, and sometimes I will, and we'll get to this part later, but sometimes I will put aside the things that I need to do for my own success to take care of the people in my life, because they've taken care of me, and that's how we survive. We're going to go ahead and turn this over to Ricky, and Ricky is going to share the next mental model with you.
Yes, thank you, Donna. And so, as we are talking about this, we understand that the audience we're speaking with is higher education and some of the students you might be seeing. And so we want to remind you too that, when we're thinking about poverty, it's not just economic, as Donna stated, but there's different how poverty can intersect with various aspects of one's life. And the most important right now, especially in what's going on with COVID, is this: the process or the poverty of understanding how to enter adulthood and independence, and knowing how to establish new relationships if they're going to a college and they never had that experience before. They don't have anyone in their family who can give them that expertise from their perspective. And so, there's some work in there by Laura Parna and higher education circles that really talk about the importance of relationships and having some kind of knowledge capital or thought capital in various domains that Donna has shared. And so when we look at the middle class mindset, poverty is looking at relationships. Middle class looks at achievement. And obviously, when we have our students who are coming into higher education circles, they're there to obviously achieve something, which is ultimately a 2-year or 4-year degree in some sort. But they are still trying to reconnect, reestablish relationships, especially if they're coming from an independent circle. And so when you look at this middle class model here, what we see is that because of achievement, we tend to send out signifiers of our achievement, right? So we post up our degrees on our offices or in our homes. We make sure that people know that we have money by allowing our kids to be in certain activities, right? Or we start putting in our money for our stocks and investments, right? We have social media accounts, which is really, really big right now, where everybody wants to kind of signify where they're at in life and their social status based on how they present themselves through a social media account. And so when we're thinking about students who are entering this adulthood and entering and have poverty in various aspects of their life, this can be very challenging because if you don't have the phone or you can't afford the phone for social media, or you're in a new location and you do not have the relationships to establish a gathering around central hobbies, or you do not have the study skills or the health necessary are needed to really stay focused and engaged in the classroom instruction. These can be very challenging. In addition to if you have various personal ailments that are complicating things and expounding situations even more so. So please be mindful that as we're dealing with poverty, dealing with relationships, the middle class is really looking at achievement. But what happens if you have not had such achievement, number one, and you're still in this process of internal development to seek achievement? How do you do that when you're lacking so many resources that you might need to be successful? Now, when we transition over to the higher, I guess you could say, wealth mindset, what we see is that um, there's a difference between achievement versus a connection. And so when we look at the wealth mindset, when we look at the wealth mindset, we see this thing of connection. What kind of connections do you have, and who can you get in contact with? And that's really looking on multiple levels of things right there. That's looking at, number one, your connections with people, but also what kind of doorways does your economic means open up for you if you are in the mental model of wealth? And so I always say, everybody knows who Michael Jordan is, but does Michael Jordan know who you are? And that's the establishment of wealth, is knowing, having people who are high profile know who you are so you can move and shake just alike. So when we go back and look at this summary, what we see is that in poverty, there can be unstable, vulnerable interlocking, right? And so sometimes things do not work because you're so contingent on how your relationships are being held or intact with other people so that you can have your day done. Are you in good company with your mentor? Are you in good company with your family to help you out in times of need? Do you have your close-knit friend group who can help you when you're starting to become mentally stressed and worn out? So these are very big things to think about. And a lot of times, what you see in the second point is that people who operate out of the poverty mindset, they're reactive, right? And then people who and they tend to stay reactive because they're contingent on what is someone else doing for me to make sure I can be successful on this end. Whereas the middle class and the wealth, they're a little bit more, you see this continuum of transitioning to more proactive, where they're going to make things happen for themselves because they have the means or the connections possible to enforce their desired results. So just be mindful about those two right there. All right. So when we look at this and we think about these mental models and these frameworks, we have to start thinking about how does this affect your bonding and attachment? And what is bonding and attachment? So bonding and attachment is based on your experiences. How do you easily relate and connect to someone who might be on a different level or a different playing field than what you are, have different experiences? And a lot of times, think about our students right now, this incoming cohort of freshman students on our campuses. This is a very unique time for bonding and attachment for them, because if you think about it, from the time they graduated their freshman year, everything has been disrupted, what they know traditionally with education. And so depending on where they're at in these quadrants might determine what their stress level is like, their anxiety level. And so when we look at someone who's very secure, they're not going to be influenced by peers. They kind of know who they are. They have a great stable group of relationships that can help them navigate and overcome these times that we have. When you have someone who's anxious and precarious, or just kind of moving around and preoccupied, what's going on is they're more susceptible of going with the majority group, I should say. They're more susceptible in trying to receive attention, and they're going to do what they think is necessary for them to be accepted within their group. And so what it means by that is, like, they're in the willows and the weeds. They move with the wind. And so one day they might be really intact and having information, but then they switch to another group, and now all of a sudden they're very difficult to deal with because their boundaries knows no bounds, because they're willows in the wind, right? And then you might have someone who's dismissive and avoidant. They're being consumed by the lack of successful relationships. They're not thinking anything's working correctly. They're thinking that it's hard for them to have that support group. And so instead of trying to continue to persist to establish these support groups, they kind of just give up on that and just settle in the fact that they might just be a loner, or they might be isolated in various aspects and stages of their life and development. And then when we look at our fearful, my screen's all over the place. When we look at fearful avoidant, what we see is that there's this operating out of fear. And when you're operating out of fear, you're letting your emotions overtake your cognitive ability for reason. And the problem with that is that you're so stressed out, you're so overcome by the different perceived attacks or realistic attacks that's coming in your life that you can't name what's happening, because there's so many different things, right? We have COVID, you have social unjust, you have economic issues going on all simultaneously. How am I going to pay for school, stay in an apartment, keep my job? I need to get 2 or 3 jobs now. And so that fear can overcome you so much that you're starting to be overcome with emotions, and you act out of emotions absent of reason. And so these can manifest in very different ways in the classroom. All right, so let's break down each one of them. And for those who have not had the privilege of being a part of the emotional poverty exercise, I really implore you to look at the AHA website and register for one of these, because these are really good information presentations that really tap into how the brain is regulated or unregulated, and how that impacts one's behavior and attitude in the classroom. So when we look at the secure and attached, what we see is that the child's sense of self or the student's sense of self is secure. So they're not going to be influenced. Like I said before, they're not going to be influenced by the things that are happening. They understand that a lot of these things happening are temporary. And so I really like the summary at the end of the quote here of this slide, which is, "I'm lovable and you will find my love worth having." And that's really an indication that they know their identity and they know themselves. But now let's contrast that with someone who's anxious and avoidant or ambivalent. If you look, they're not assured of who they are, and so they constantly try to seek affirmation from various groups. And so what's going on here is, at the end of this slide, you see that the quote is, "I'm not lovable, but you are so loving that I will do anything to get you to stay and like me." And so this is when you start to see students start to associate themselves with not so positive influences. They start to get into maybe some drugs or usage that they shouldn't get into. They start to try to follow the in crowd and go more down the negative path of the college experience, where that's really going to be distracting and take them away of what is needed to be successful in the college classroom. The next one is that anxious and avoidant. So we remember, they tend to be loners. They have difficulty forming relationships, so they kind of give up on even attempting to try. And so these are the students who I call are your silent ones in the corners in your classrooms, who are coming, who are just like, "Hey, I'm here to get my work done. I'm checking in. I'm here physically. I'm not really here mentally, and you won't even notice me anyway to know that I'm not here mentally. So what's the point?" And so you see at the end of this slide, it says, "I'm unlovable and you're going to reject me anyway, so why bother?" So what's the point of me even trying to engage in the classroom? Because you're going to dismiss my thoughts anyway. No one's going to understand what perspective I'm coming from. No one's going to know the experiences or the lack of resources or tools that I've had, and that how much of a struggle it is for me to try to be successful in college. And so these are the mindsets that's coming on that one. And then lastly, what we see on the disorganized attachment one is that because they're operating out of fear, remember I told you that emotions is overcoming the cognitive reasoning of their mental state. And so what we see is that I'm lovable, but you're either too insensitive to see it, or you're just not worthy of my love. And so what they're saying is like, look, there's so many things attacking y'all at once. I know who I am, but I'm just so overcome by emotion that I don't even have time to try to get you to understand where I'm at. And so they vacillate day in and day out. If they don't have as many triggers, they're a little bit more happier in class and energetic and engaging. If they have a lot of triggers, they're more aggressive, or not necessarily aggressive, but they're more defensive, they're more kind of agitated, etc. So these 4 slides is really kind of giving you an understanding of those bonding and attachment styles and how they work and how they might be manifested in the classroom. Donna?
Okay, I think I'm unmuted now, right? So I'm
Yep, you're
good?
good.
Okay. So one of the things that's really interesting about what Ricky talked about was that you have those different types of students coming with those different types of attachments, which means we're going to see some of them that need more of us, that need more intentional interventions, that need us to actually step in and be pretty explicit about different things. You're going to have your secure attachment people who will realize that there are hidden rules to this college life maybe, and they're secure enough to go out and find out what those things are. What are those hidden rules? What are the things that they need to know to be successful? And then you're going to have some of those other students who, they don't know, or maybe they do pull back and maybe they're just like, I can't do this and I give up because I don't understand this stuff. I don't get it. So one of the most impactful and intentional interventions that we can do with students, that we can offer to them, is to direct teach them the hidden rules of the class, of the classroom, and of our institutions, because they don't know. And it's pretty amazing the things that we think they know that they just don't know. And so what we find is that in order to be able to direct teach the hidden rules with students, we have to have a relationship of some kind with them. And what I always tell the people that I work with, especially on my campus, is you don't have to have this really fantastic relationship in order to be able to teach hidden rules, but you have to have begun the process of developing a relationship. You have to have given them that moment of, this person might actually really want to help me. They might be somebody I can trust. They don't even have to 100% trust you, to get started, but they have to have some idea that maybe you can be trusted and you do care about them. The hidden rules, of course, are the unspoken cues and habits of a group. There are hidden rules in our classrooms, in our programs, in the commons, or where you eat food, in our unions. There are hidden rules everywhere, and our students come and they don't know what those hidden rules are. And so just to take this back to economic class just a little bit, so the mental model we had for poverty, there are a specific set of hidden rules that helps our students survive in that economic environment. And then if you flip over to the mental model of middle class, there are a specific set of rules, of hidden rules, that help the people within that economic environment to survive within that economic environment. And those two sets of hidden rules are very different. They're very different. And one of the things that when we talk to students, I'm pretty explicit about hidden rules. I say there are hidden rules in all environments, and let me help you understand the environment, or the hidden rules here. And I also make sure they understand that there's not a set of hidden rules that is right and a set of hidden rules that is wrong. They're just different. And the analogy I give them, because I do work with a lot of athletes, is, so you have a set of basketball rules and you have a set of football rules. Which set of rules is correct? Which one is right? Well, it depends on the game you're playing. And so then I always use the analogy that college is a game. This environment is just like a game. What game are you playing here? And how is this game different than the game at home? How is this game different than within your economic environment? And so I let them know that that's not right or wrong. It's just there's a different set of rules for wherever you are. And so very explicit with our students about some of the hidden rules. And one of the things that we understand is that hidden rules, relationships can definitely be broken when you don't know the hidden rules. And so a lot of times our students don't really realize that there's a hidden rule until they've broken one. And I can give several examples about this, as I'm sure Ricky can too, but I had a professor come down and talk to me yesterday, I believe, and he said, that student you were talking about, he came into the classroom, he was 5 minutes late, other students were already presenting, he went to the back of the classroom and sat down. And then he noticed that his friend was at the front of the room. And then he remembered that I had told him the day before that he needed to sit in the front of the classroom if he was going to be successful in that class. So he got up in the middle of this student's presentation, went and kind of did the little fist bump or the high five to his friend sitting up in the front row and had a seat, said, hey. The thing is, he doesn't know what he doesn't know. And if I've come from years of high school where I can do things like that, or I could move around the classroom a little bit, because a lot of our students have come from high schools where there maybe hasn't been as much structure as some of our other students in the classroom. And so he doesn't know what he doesn't know. But our professors a lot of times won't actually say to students, hey, this is something, that we don't do in the classroom, and here's why. It's another thing about tardiness and all of those things. So we'll get there, but hidden rules really can limit the interactions with people who are different. And we spend a lot of time on our campus educating our faculty, our staff, our student government about the hidden rules and how they can help other students understand those hidden rules. I'm going to go ahead and let Ricky share with you guys the hidden rules of economic class. And then when he's finished with that, I'm going to share just a little bit about some of the hidden rules that are very specific to college success.
Good deal. Thank you, Donna. And as Donna was talking, I just remember when we're dealing with the college aspect in the arena, knowledge of the resources you need is the currency for success in college. And then when you're going in and you have not experienced college, or you haven't experienced what it takes to be successful in college, you might lack some of those resources if you're introduced to them. And I remember, for me personally, a personal story for me was I didn't know anything about internships until my senior year. It was already too late. No one ever told me that you can go do these things called internships over the summer, and that can help you get a job after you graduate. And so when I finally learned about it, it was too late, but I make sure that students understand those things. And so as Donna was talking, what we did was we wanted to kind of give you some examples of some of the hidden rules of economic class, but also just hidden rules in general and how they might apply, right? So social emphasis. When we think about the social emphasis, when you're dealing with someone who might come from a poverty mindset, you're only hanging out with people that you like, right? Because you don't have time to try to impress other people. Most people look down upon you anyway because of what the perceived knowing of who you are because of what class you might be in temporarily. And so they look down upon you. So you only are friends with people that you need to be friends with. Whereas with the middle class, the emphasis is on self-governance and self-sufficiency. You're starting to figure out, who do I need to know so I can have more of an expansion of knowledge of resources? And who do I need to know that can help elevate me, that mentorship, to get to an achieved destination? And then when you look at the wealth side of it, the emphasis is on social exclusion, right? And so now you're a well-known researcher, you're a well-known individual. And so now everybody's calling for your time and asking for your time. And so now you start to be more exclusive with how you utilize your time and which persons or people you're going to spend time with in a social gathering, right? And so thinking about time, I want to go down to the bottom, which is that for most people, the mindset of poverty is that it's the present. What am I doing now with my time? How do I survive from this moment to the next, which is the mandate? Whereas with the middle class, remember, it's achievement. So when you have achievement, you already have a vision. And so a lot of times when our students are struggling and they don't know what they want to do, or the undeclared majors, what you're really saying sometimes is that they haven't seen how the courses align with the perceived vision of what they have for themselves, or they do not have a vision right now, and they need help with either advisors, professors, etc., helping cultivate and shape that vision for them. And then when you look at wealth, then it's about traditions and past history. Well, the question becomes, if you don't have a family tradition of going to college, or you don't have, or you're in an identity where your past history is not recognized, then how do you make decisions on what you need to do in a new space that's very foreign to you? And so you might have to spend more time understanding that situation, understanding the traditions that have made that institution what it is, understanding and cultivating and learning the traditions or habits of people who have been successful and how they utilize their time. And so those are a couple examples. And then going forward, I wanted to talk about directly with education, because that's what this is about today, right? And so in the poverty mindset, we looked at education as is valued and revered as abstract, but not as reality. Like, you just do it, but there's really no need. Like, why do I need to go into student loan debt just to have a job? That's the mindset sometimes, is that they're already behind the 8 ball. Why even dig even further down economically just to have a job or a degree. And so so sometimes people don't make the connection that, well, actually, you're making this investment in yourself. So it's not a debt, it's an investment. And the back end, the income of it is going to be something that you get a residual from, because now you're putting yourself at a higher starting level going therefore afterwards. In the middle class, it's crucial for climbing again, so they recognize that. And then, well, it's the necessary tradition of making those and maintaining those connections. And so we see that you start thinking about, it's not necessarily going to college, but what type of college are you going to, right? And what type of degree are you getting? Are you getting the professional degree? Are you going to the Ivy League schools? And that's a differentiator. Now, when I talk about love, I understand sometimes you might be thinking, what's love got to do with, like Tina Turner? What's love got to do with it in higher education? I'm just here to teach the class. They're here to learn. I don't need to give them any love and affection. But love and acceptance is conditional when you think about this poverty mindset, right? So it's whether the individual is liked. And going back to what Donna said, can they trust you? Well, a lot of times from a faculty position, that is predicated upon how are you wording your syllabus and what kind of indirect messaging are you giving a student in class. If you got a syllabus worded on that pretty much your schedule needs to be flexible to my schedule in this class at all points in life, then we're not showing as much love, because that student might have to work 2 or 3 jobs. They might have to be late to a meeting. They might have to be late to a class. You might need to recognize and understand, especially in this day and age, we need to be flexible in that. And so if we're coming down with kind of like a very dictatorship mind style in our syllabus, that can set a negative connotation that this professor is not really interested in educating me. They just want to show me how smart they are, and they want to have a power control in the classroom. So be mindful about that. And then with the middle class, where it's basically on achievement, what we want to make sure we emphasize is that the biggest asset that you have in the classroom with your students is maintaining high expectations. All right, and that's to say that we are showing them that we see the potential in them to achieve these expectations, but we're also willing to walk alongside them to help them show how the path is necessary to reach those expectations. And so maintaining high expectations is very, very critical in student success development and persistence within the college rank. All right, and then lastly, helping them. So, you know, there's a saying within the AHA process is that you want more than just a champion, you want an advocate. You want someone who's going to go beyond just giving you good encouragement, but also telling people, give this individual a chance because they have potential. Speak positive into this individual's life because they have potential. And so that's what we want to do, is be able to be an advocate, so we can help them build those social networks that are crucial for their own development. Donna?
All right. So here's the deal. Since you're not handing out tons of money, here's some hidden rules that you can help with on your campus that doesn't cost you anything. And so helping them understand about time, helping them understand about money, language, and helping them understand about formal register, which is something that Ricky will talk about here pretty soon. But specifically the hidden rules. So some of the things in hidden rules, if you can help them understand some of these things, they're going to help them be more successful and you can have an impact. So with that, Destiny, what we do is we spend a lot of time with our students trying to align things that give our students choice, so that they realize that everything they do, there is a choice there. And then those choices lead to certain consequences. So if they choose to do, or if they choose not to do, there's a consequence, because students from the economic environment of poverty don't feel like they ever have choice. It's all fate. This just happens to me. It doesn't matter what I do, I can't get ahead. It doesn't matter what I do, something bad's going to happen in an hour or the next day. I don't have any control. So they're very fated. And so the more that we empower them to believe in choice, the easier it is for them to see that they do have an impact on their future. And when I believe I have an impact on my future, then I might actually start to be more intentional in my actions. And I might actually believe you when you talk about my potential. And so we oftentimes do that. So with time, present survival is the most important, what we know about that. So when I have students that are like, my professor doesn't care if I walk in late and I'm tardy, and I'm like, how do you know he doesn't care? Well, he's never said anything. You're right. He hasn't said anything, but he does care. And let me tell you how I know he cares. And then we just walk through and we talk about what that means to be tardy, how his professor potentially sees him, and all of those other things. And it's like, okay, so we're going to get to a slide in a minute where we talk about reframing hidden rules. And this is how you do it. This is how you reframe hidden rules. You listen to a student's perspective on it and you understand their perspective on it. And then you help reframe that for them so that they get the picture of what does this look like in this environment I'm in, and how is it going to hurt me or help me? There's a whole lot to be said about money. We won't go around money yet. We do a lot of financial literacy. I'm the director for a TRIO program, and so we do a lot of financial literacy. So some of you TRIO people might know that. So we do a lot of financial literacy because we want to help our students understand money from the economic environment of middle class, not because we want our students to be middle class, but because we want to pull our students out of an unstable environment and help them create a stable environment for their future. Language is another one. Ricky's going to get into this. How many of you, well, so rhetorical question. How many of you receive papers from your students or things that are written from your students that are written just like they talk? Just like they talk. And sometimes they get up in the front of the room and they give presentations and you're just like, oh, and everybody's so shocked because they're not formal and they're not professional and what is wrong with this student? Okay, formal register is a hidden rule of middle class institutions, churches, businesses. Our students don't know that. Sometimes casual register is the only thing they've known, so formal register needs to be taught. Formal register is often taught in our developmental English courses to students who only speak in casual register. Ricky will get into that in a little bit. One of the things Ricky talked about was that he did talk about like liking people, that social emphasis. So I'm just going to give you one real quick example here, really quick example of a student, and I'm going to call her Diane, and she comes into me, she wants to transfer to a school, so we're putting together her semester to be able to transfer, and this other school wanted her to have government, so she was taking some classes that would transfer so she wasn't wasting a semester. Needless to say, it's midterm time, she has a D in the course, she comes in, she's like, yeah, I'm going to fail government. I'm like, why are you going to fail government? And she said, I don't like him. And I said, oh, so are you taking the class for him? And she says, well, no, but I don't like him, so I'm not doing that work. And I was like, okay, so we had to reframe that issue. And I had to say, so are you going to have to retake this class when you transfer? And are you wasting time? What are the benefits to doing well in this class for you? And so we really had to work through and reframe that. And it was just an aha moment for her. Because you don't know what you don't know until somebody says, have you thought about it this way? Or have you looked at it like this? Or what if it's this way? Those are conversations that we can have with our students. They take a little bit of time, but it changes their life because it helps them to make really great choices. All right, and these are just a few of the key points. A lot of people equate the knowledge of hidden rules with intelligence. And I ask my students, I said, what do people think about people who do this? And I give an example of a hidden rule and they're like, they think they're stupid. And I said, yeah, that's right, but are they stupid? And they're like, no, they just don't know. And that's right. And so just thinking about looking at your students and wondering about their set of hidden rules and having conversations and just asking questions and being interested in them helps you to understand where you can make the biggest impact. I'm just going to go through this real quick because I'm not going to leave Ricky much time. So I'm going to fly through cognitive skills. This is something that we usually spend at least a good hour on a lot of these things when we do trainings. And so we're a lot of very concrete skills. Our students have very concrete skills. They don't think abstractly. Part of that is because mediation hasn't really happened in their world a lot of times. When families live in the tyranny of the moment, it's really hard to just take the time and to just control your emotions and mediate these different learning experiences for your children. An example of this is, so your child runs out into the middle of the street because the ball went out there, right? And so how that might be mediated in poverty just because of the instant threat and the impulsiveness, different things like that, is the kid runs back up and maybe just gets a little swat on the butt or just gets yelled at, get out of the road, right? And so that experience isn't mediated. But if it is mediated, it's, hey, you ran into the street without looking. So there's the what. You ran into the street without looking. Why that matters is because you have to go to the road and you have to look both ways because a car might come. And if a car comes and doesn't see you, that car could hit you and you could die. Okay, that's the why. So the how then that we explain to our child is the next time your ball rolls to the street, you need to walk to the side of the street and you need to look right, look left, maybe look right and left again. And then if no car is coming, walk out into the street and get your ball and come back to the yard. That is a mediated learning experience. And that's very simplified, but every situation in our life, every learning experience, if it's mediated, is stronger and builds cognitive skills. And so this, I'm just going to give you a real quick example. So can anybody put in the chat box real quick, where do we start in college when it comes to teaching students? Do we start at the input phase, the elaboration phase, or the output phase in the classroom when it comes to teaching our students things, or even in our programs? Does anybody know where we start or has a guess? Okay, sometimes we start with output. Yeah, sometimes like we're like, give this to us, right? We're just like, we want you to communicate this. We want you to do this. Oftentimes in higher ed, we start with elaboration. Okay, one example, I taught developmental psychology and I was like, okay, you guys need to come up with a research question. That was step one, come up with a research question. In order to come up with a research question, you have to identify and define the problem, right? So they had to come up with a problem, they had to, define it, they had to look at it, they had to look at the research, compare some data, try to figure out what their question was going to be. Well, go back to input. That's what's missing with a lot of our students is the input. A lot of our students are missing those cognitive skills when it comes to input, the planning behaviors, being able to focus in on something. If any of you are parents and you have kids and you've ever been like, look at this thing. No, pay attention. I want you to look at this, and you really focus something in and try to show it to them. You're helping them to build that cognitive skill of just focusing in on one piece of information, which leads to a lot of really cool things and all of the rest of the input. And so our students are missing the input skills, which is why everybody's like time management. My students don't know how to plan. My students don't know how to figure stuff out. They don't know how to organize. They don't know how to focus. And a lot of our students say, I just can't focus. I've never been able to focus. Nobody's ever taught them those skills, but those skills are teachable and we have to spend a lot of time doing that. So oftentimes you have to back up and teach the input. And just like in my dev psych class, I had to back up and we had to start with the input phase before they could just give me a magnificent research question. And so there's a lot more information about this cognitive skills. And like when we're done, we can tell you where you can find more information about things too. And Ricky.
Thank you. And I was thinking on the money side, Donna, as you was talking, one mistake that a lot of college students make, at least I made in my freshman year, was the first time I got that financial aid refund check. I thought I was rich, and I thought I had a lot of money, especially if I come from a lack of economics. And I spent all that money almost on one weekend in the local clubs. And so one thing that you want to kind of talk about on that is when they first, if it's a student's first time getting a massive check where it's, tens of thousands or multiple thousands of dollars, helping them going through that what, why, and how process of this is money that you will owe back eventually. So what you might want to do is save some of this for emergencies instead of thinking you just have all this extra money to spend, because then on the back end of the semester, when you really do come into a financial situation or you come short up on work or whatever the case may be, you have a fallback. And so that's something that's really good to think about too. And so as Donna explained, when we think about language, we think about form of register and the proper way to speak when we're in academic circles, right? So, if I was in an academic presentation right now, I might say, I'm not here to supply you with a bunch of mellifluous, glanquiliquant, cecipedalia, and elocution. I'm just here to speak plainly to you today. And a lot of you all might be like, what the world? This is a college presentation. I don't know what you just said either. But it's just these use of words. And think about, if you don't know what I just said using those big words, how does a student feel sometimes with the words that we think they might understand and they don't? And so we really want to understand how to go from our casual language words and usage that we use with our friends or within our family, and how do we utilize that in the classroom differently, right? So frozen language are those things that we constantly repeat, right? The Pledge of Allegiance, your Lord's Prayer, and wedding vows, right? And but then your formal language is more of the really the word choice, to really getting into the English syntax and the structure and formation of how a sentence is put together. So there is logical reasoning. And then when we think about consultative language, really that is formal register when it's used in conversation, but really consultative language is also doing more of taking that language and mirroring it back to where you have a reflective uh, conversation. So my job is to really listen, make sure I'm hearing what I heard, and then reflecting back, well, is this what you really want to say? Because this is the way it's impacted. And then casual language is just, hey, I'm about to give y'all a presentation today. It's going to be about formal language, the things that students need to know in college to be successful. Sit back and relax. There's a totally different indirect or about casual language when you're in certain circles. The way you might speak in a presentation like me and Donna is doing right now might be completely different if me and Donna was just to go hang out after work one day. All right. And then lastly, there's intimate language where you have like cues of affection for people in your family or your spouse or your significant other, right? And so for my daughter, I call her Boo Boo. I don't call her by her formal name unless she's in trouble, so she knows the difference. So if I call her Boo Boo, that means come here, Daddy loves you. If I call her Anaya, that means you might want to run, and so Daddy don't find you. And so that's just the differences of languages that we utilize in our everyday world. All right, and so a lot of times when a student's first getting introduced to the expectations of higher ed, they bring in the casual language. They have to transition. You know, for a lot of us in higher education, we know there's a difference between academic writing and research writing. There's a difference between writing for a journal publication and writing for a manuscript in a book, for a book, right? And so we understand because there's these differences, but students don't understand that necessarily right off the bat. So you really have to take them down how to be succinct, how to be straight to the point with some of their findings or what they're trying to say, and not go into a long rambling to get to a point, because then you'll lose the audience on what you're talking about, right? So we want to help them really strategically get from point A. What is the significance of point A? How is this going to inform me for point B? Point B recaps point A, its significance, the significance of point B, to point C, which is the conclusion, which is going to recap all these things. And if you think about what we did today in with the case of formal register with our opening session, if you were really paying attention, you notice that all these opening session presenters, there was a theme about it. And then I summed up and I said, you know, here's what we're hearing. Don't quit. Failure might be a part of it, of life, but quitting is truly the end. So failure is not the end. We don't want to quit. And so what we want to do with formal language is just help students really be more succinct in their thoughts and understanding. And this is really important when they're trying to communicate frustrations or obstacles. If we get them in this casual thing, they might be more averse to getting through the emotions, and then they go down this long tangent or something, and we lose what are they really wanting us to help them with. But the more that we can give them command over formal language register, then they're able to better communicate their issues, what solutions they're needing, and how we can help them in that situation, or help them build relationship, or help them build understanding in these times as well. So hopefully that makes sense. So when we look at stories, exactly what I just talked about. Casual goes up and down. There's a lot of different things, but formal is going from one clear destination point to the other. Okay. So when we think about this, there's a research study by Hart and Risley that talks about the words that your child is exposed to really helps inform how they go about life, pretty much. And so the more words they're exposed to early on in their childhood, the better that they are at communicating things, being very clear in their expectations, knowing how to communicate their obstacles or situations that they're going through. And so this is what you see. 13 million words on average gives about the indication of a welfare mindset. 26 million words working class, 45 million words professional. But then what's really important to me is the affirmations versus the prohibits. All right, and so prohibitions. I'm sorry. So when we see with the affirmation is that as your word count goes up, you have more words and resources in your tool belt to provide positive affirmations. And that positive affirmation is that attunement that students are seeking. So I know this is challenging, but how are you going to reaffirm me that I have the opportunity and the potential to achieve your high expectations? And so if we just communicate high expectations with no affirmation, no understanding of here's resources that's going to help you be successful in class, but we bury our resources in our syllabi at the very bottom, but not at the top, to show them how this is going to be a co-collaboration of achievement, then we're putting the students sometimes in this this mindset where they start to have negative prohibitions in their mind that this teacher is not for me. Going back to what just Donna said, I'm going to fail this class because I don't like this teacher. Well, why don't you like the teacher? Sometimes it's because the words or the presence of mind that we've presented through our syllabi and through our first day of communicating to our students. And so again, I want to harp on, it's okay to have high expectations, but also have high collaborations with the students along with the high expectations, so they know that you're in there to help them be successful, and you want to see them achieve, and you want to see them fulfill their potential that they have inside of them, because a lot of these students are navigating the independence and the adulthood necessary, and they're trying to learn how to come out of a certain class of poverty mindset to middle class or wealth class. And so they're trying to understand how these things happen so they can be successful. Because at the beginning, I shared that knowledge is the capital that is necessary to be successful within college, okay? And so nonverbal, pay attention to nonverbal cues. Again, your nonverbal cues can be your tone of voice, it could be your body language, it could be the way you're communicating things in your syllabi, it could be the way you're communicating things in your feedback and your assessments on their assignments when you turn them in. If you just, I remember one of my college professors just wrote it was like one of those movie scenes. They just wrote an F, circled it big and red, and just put what. And that's all they gave me. They didn't give me no feedback on why I got an F. They just put what. And so I had to go back and ask, like, what does this mean? And then they explained, like, well, I didn't understand where you're going with this. I'm like, well, why didn't you just write that? You just put a big old F and put what? And that didn't help me. And that really destroyed my confidence in that class and made me really, to this day, although I have a PhD, very apprehensive about my writing. Because if someone doesn't understand what I got to say, are they going to communicate back to me reflectively and in a critical but also constructive format, or are they just leaving me kind of like absent with not enough cues as well? So make sure you provide enough cues, but make sure your nonverbal cues are also signifying that you have high expectations and also success potential for those students as well. And then lastly, relationships must be mutual respect. They must be built on that. And so before someone can trust you, they have to have respect for you. And so when we talked about this, or Donna talked about this early on, that depending where you're coming from, when you're building relationships, those relationships are built on trust. But individually, you want to know they respect you for who you are, regardless of what you don't have or what you do have, right? So if I'm someone from poverty, I might not have as many resources, or I might have a lot of resources, and I'm thinking you just want me because of my resources. Think about the wealth side. Do you respect me for who I am, first and foremost? So again, you want to have high expectations. You want to have respect for that individual. You want to have motivation and persistence that comes from that relationship, so the insistence. And then at all times, always look for affirmation and confirmation and validation, so we can have attunement and a true relationship of development for these students. Donna?
All right. And so I wanted to go back just a little bit. And so when we talked about mediating all of those different things, every single thing can be mediated with our students. One of the things with casual and formal register is that, like just the other day in a lesson with my class, we wrote an email to a professor in formal register, because we hear a lot, like, our students get nailed sometimes from people on campus, like, that is not how you write an email to me. You should go see somebody to learn how to write appropriate email to me. And I mean, that just crushes our students. And so sometimes when we have students that are like, do I really belong in college? Do I want to go home? It is something as simple as that message that could send our kids home, that could just be like, you know what, I'm done with this place. I am going home. It could be the straw that broke the camel's back, right? And so we teach them we just teach them, we mediate those processes for them. And so in this expectations, here's how oh gosh, did I do that? When we mediate expectations for our students, we want to talk to them. So regardless of if they're in a program with you or a classroom. So for example, I have students with my program, there's expectations with them, but I also have them in class. So let's say they've missed a class. I had a girl miss a class the other day because she'd missed work over the weekend because she didn't feel good. So she decided to schedule a shift during class. Okay. So my thing with her was, you come in and see me and I will give you half of your class points back if you make an office visit with me. The reason I want her in my office is because I want to be able to do this right here. I want to mediate expectations and I want to teach her a hidden rule. So, you go over what expectation was missed, why it's important, and what are the consequences. And you don't just talk at them, you let them discover these things. What are the consequences then? And then we let them know, if you choose to do this, then this is what you've chosen. And then you do the flip side of it. Here's what's expected. Here's why it's important, how you'll benefit. And so if you choose to do this, then you're choosing this. So you always say, if you choose, then you have chosen, with one choice and then with the opposite choice. So in the positive and in the negative, because then it builds that future story. It helps them begin to see that they do have choices. And so you can work through that. Sometimes when they don't come to class because they're taking a family member to a doctor's appointment, that's something that you can mediate with students, because then again, you talk about hidden rules and what's going to help them be successful. And is there a different way to do it that's going to help them next time, and not just, is there a different way to create an appointment? And so we help them do all of those different things. But
can I jump in on that real quick, Donna?
Yeah.
So I think this is important, and kind of mediating expectations is the way we develop things. And even in my class, one thing I kind of set up for the students is this. I understand that life happens outside the classroom, and there's times in which you have to go to work or you have to come to class, but you don't really feel like being there. And sometimes we have those days, but we have, as faculty members and administrators, we have the power dynamic on our side to where we can just cancel class or not show up or take a sick day. So I always offer to my students, you get 3 passes throughout the semester in which, if you know that you need to come to class, but you just didn't read the assignment for whatever, you get a pass for participation. But you have to let me know on the front end, hey, I just want to take my pass today. And then at the end of class, you have to tell me why. But that's to let them know, like, look, we understand life sometimes gets the best of us and we have too many things to juggle, and that's okay. So just let me know what's going on. And that's another way of staying in communication. But once those 3 passes are used up, then I make that sure that they understand that you chose to use those 3 passes, you have no more left. And so that's how I maintain that expectation of collaboration and persistence. Go ahead, Don, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you for that, Ricky. So we'll finish up here because I know we're at the end. This is our last slide. The reason why I added this is there's, of course, another hour's worth of lesson around this. But you are capital for students, and some of you are bonding capital and bridging capital. And so it's kind of like when Ricky was talking about how he didn't even know about internships, right? We have this potential to do all of these different things for our students and to approach them from a resource building perspective that doesn't cost our institutions anything. It's just how we approach our students and how we help them build those resources within themselves to be able to persist and to graduate from college. And so I like this because we are the social capital. It's something that we can do. We can help connect our students with other people. We can be that support for them. We can help them believe in themselves, and that they do belong at our colleges, and that they do deserve to graduate, and that they are capable. And Ricky, I'll go ahead and let you finish up the presentation.
Yep. So I usually when I do classes or presentation, I always start and end with this particular slide. And today I'm just ending with it because we wanted to make sure we took time to really get into the issues that you have. And as I'm talking about this, I would love, because we have a little bit of time, to take some questions too. So if you have any questions based on some of these presentations, or scenarios that you would like for us to kind of like problem shoot and talk about it out loud, so we can kind of deal with those at once, I welcome that as well. But I always remind students, faculty, and staff when I'm doing different trainings this concept of how do you classify these. And what I mean by that is the only thing you should strive to seek each day, day in and day out, is 1 degree of change. You're not trying to make a big difference, 180% difference and stuff like that. But if you strive for 1 degree of change, at the end of a semester, you've made significant progress. And what I mean by that is when you think about water, water at 33 degrees is just cold, but at 32 degrees is ice. Water at 211 degrees is just hot, all right? But at 212 degrees, it becomes steam. That means this, over time, what happens is these students or faculty, etc., they might not understand the 1 degree of input and resources you're sowing into them, but over time, their state of mind changes. So we can look outside and see when it's raining that it's above 32 degrees. And then almost all of a sudden, over time, you look outside and all of a sudden you start seeing snowflakes. You know something has changed. And so that's the same approach that we need to take with our students and our colleagues, is that you're not trying to reap the reward right there after week 1, because some of these students are coming from years of having a certain mindset. And so when they're having years of a certain mindset, you dealing with them for a month is not going to automatically just be magic and they just get it all of a sudden. It needs to be constantly showing in that 1 degree of progress, so it's subtle enough to where it's digestible for them and not too much catching them off guard, but it's also subtle enough to where you stay persistent with it. Because sometimes we feel like we throw all this effort into students and to other people, and we don't get this reward back. And we feel like we just put all this time and effort in, and we want immediate gratification. But this is just like sowing seeds that farmers do. You sow a seed, you nurture it all every day, and then 2 or 3 months down the line, you start to see a crop develop out the soil. And so just remember that what we're trying to do is sow 1 degree of change every day for our students. And so that way we maintain our patience and our persistence, but then it's also digestible, and the students sense an element of trust, respect, and that we have high expectations for them, but that those high expectations are achievable because we believe in them to succeed. Failure is not the end, only quitting. So I just wanted to end with this slide because I think it's a really good visual reminder of me every day, but also for our colleagues, seek to do the 1%, not the 10, but just the 1%. So that's how we will end this presentation. Donna, I don't know, while I was talking, was there any good questions in the chat?
Let's see. There were lots of great comments.
I see one here. Are you about any tips you can give?
Yeah, any tips you can give to me regarding college students?
And that was from somebody who's planning to do getting ahead for the first time with a group of college students.
Oh, well, Carla, do you want to talk about investigations then?
Heavens no, you guys go ahead and take it away.
Okay, so one of the things is getting ahead is that, that work for students or not students, investigations is like the college or the higher ed curriculum. Carla, you might have been better at this. The curriculum that we use in higher ed that is equivalent to getting ahead. And so I use investigations with a lot of our students in our TRIO program. And so it's something that you can definitely look more into, is the investigations curriculum as well. And so, there's a lot of us too, because I think that's S. Campbell's. You guys, we have some, like, you can email us, ask questions about anything, and there's lots of information on the site.
I think one thing, a tip to remember with the college students, in particular, when you're doing any kind of objective learning to get them to see and understand, is that they're all coming in with different perspectives. And so kind of what Donna said before, when no one should invalidate another student's experiences on how they came to a certain understanding about something at that point in time. So they're all coming in different stages and walks of life. And so the first thing to do is to really make sure you establish this understanding that people have different experiences in this classroom, which is going to shape their perspectives about things that are taught. And what we are trying to do is help develop an additional lens of experience or different stage of experiences as they're going through here. And so you have students who are coming from rural backgrounds, very, very rural, where there's only, like one of my classes, literally his graduating student class was 3 people. And then I had another student whose graduating class was 2,000. And so, you have to think about, depending on where they're at, urban, rural, the experience that they've had, the household development, their bonding and attachment style, they're going to receive and interpret information differently. And so just because someone interprets information differently doesn't mean that they're wrong. And oftentimes from a diversity standpoint, this is why I always say, this is where a lot of conflict comes from in the diversity realm, is because we come from a competing values mindset, which means that we think someone has to be wrong for me to be right. And where really the essence of conflict comes from is that both individuals are right, but they don't understand the experiences of the other. And so once we get that mutual respect of respecting each other's experiences, then I think they'll be more apt to learn from each other and understand the approach and the objectives and the diagrams that you're trying to share with them to help them get to another level of understanding about life as a whole, their community, each other, and then ultimately themselves as they persist through adulthood. Hopefully that answers your question.
All right, and Heidi had a question, mentioned needing to have an existing relationship. Tips discovered about starting a relationship with a student, communicating to them that you can be a trusted influence. I'm going to tell you what I've learned over my years in TRIO and having students from, extreme poverty and stuff, is that genuineness and authenticity, you can get a long ways. Ricky talked a little bit about nonverbals, and students read our nonverbals because our nonverbals come from our intentions. And so if I have a student that's walking into this room and the only thing I really want them to do is go away because I don't really feel like I have time or I don't want to deal with them right now, that's going to come out in my nonverbals. And there are times when we have students maybe that aren't our favorites, and it's hard to kind of bring ourselves, But the thing is, if you can stop for a couple of seconds and go, what is my intention right now in this next interaction that I have with a student? What's my intention? And if my intention is to make sure that they leave me feeling better than they felt when they came, or having more answers, or feeling more connected, that's going to show in my nonverbals. Our nonverbals are how we show up and how we're genuine and how we're authentic. And I think for me, a lot of that has been a big piece of those relationships, but it's also doing what I said I was going to do. Like if I said I was going to do something, I make sure I follow up on it, because they're watching. All they're doing is just watching to see if we are a genuine human for the most part. Ricky, you want to add anything to that?
No, I think I was looking at some other questions that was coming in as she was talking. So I think that was great, but I want to kind of transition over to this other question that came from, I can't find it now. It was there, and then, here it is. Ruth. And so, when you ask, so when it comes to hidden rules, does that concept originate from the AHA process? And the specific word hidden, would you be able to speak a bit more into the concept on why you believe these rules are across race, or class, etc., was, or continues to be masked or veiled? Well, a lot of it is that we say the word hidden, and specifically, I think Ruby came up with this understanding of hidden is because sometimes is what we already know is what we think is subconsciously acceptable to everybody, and so we assume everybody's on the same page. And so really, it's just kind of like the understanding of what to do, the customs and norms of your society or your neighborhood that you're familiar with, and then when you go to another one, there's different customs of society. So when I think about that, what I mean by that is we know certain remarks to use, even if you think about nationality, right? So if you ever traveled abroad, then all of a sudden you might not know the hidden rules on using inflection when speaking certain words, or a thumbs up in America means good, but it might not necessarily mean the same thing, or it might be something derogatory in another country. And you don't know those hidden rules because they have different customs and norms. And so that's what we're talking about, is that the rules that you have are successful, are helping you be successful, but then there's additional rules in a certain space that you have, and how do they intersect with class and race? I think there's a significant correlation between the intersection between these, because depending on if you're in a predominantly white space, you might have to remove certain norms that you think are acceptable, and you realize they're quickly not acceptable in a classroom setting or on a college campus. If you're in a class and you realize that there are certain ways to, when you first go to a scholarship banquet or you go to a banquet of any kind on a college level, you might realize that there's hidden rules about, they don't tell you how to dress typically, or they don't tell you examples of what business formal means, right? Or the difference between business formal or professional formal. But most people on college campuses know when they go to a banquet or a gala what that means, right? And so if a student who's coming from a certain program, they might not recognize that. I remember one time I had a student, I rewarded these two students when I was working with K through 12 students, and the student dressed up because I was giving them a reward by taking them to Denny's. And he dressed up tie, suit jacket. And I said, why you dressed up? You overdressed for this. And he says, I've never had a breakfast in a restaurant before. And so I've never been to and so that just lets you know the hidden rules of poverty versus middle class, when a lot of people would think, oh, it's Denny's. There was a time when Red Lobster, there was a hidden rule that you had to dress up to go to Red Lobster. That was a very fine dining establishment, and now it's more kind of relaxing their norms. And so there's a lot of different ways this intersects on your cultural identity, your nationality, your language identity, your religion identity, your religious identity, etc. And so knowing how to navigate in different spaces with different cultural norms is going to be important for success. Hopefully that answered your question.
Well, folks, my iPhone says it's 1 o'clock on the dot, which would be the end of this session. It has been recorded, and the recording as well as the PowerPoint will be available on the Breakout session website that you have. So my thanks to Donna and Ricky. They did a great job, and I hope that you all have a beautiful rest of your day and enjoy the equinox.
Thank you, and I'll see you all tomorrow morning.
Yeah, thank you all, and have a good rest of your day.